The observation deck of station was quiet in the early morning hours. Commander Hayes stood at the window looking out at the stars. The research station orbited a small moon on the edge of human space. 500 people lived and worked here, studying distant worlds and strange phenomena. They were far from home, but they were safe. Or at least that was what told himself. The station had been built 10 years ago by the United Nations Space Command. It was supposed to be a place of peace and discovery. Scientists studied the formation of stars. Engineers tested new technologies. Doctors conducted medical research that would help people on Earth. Everyone here had volunteered to work in isolation, knowing they were far from civilization. But they had chosen this life because they believed in the mission. Was 43 years old. He had spent half his life in space. His face was weathered from decades of work. His hands were strong and steady. He had commanded this station for 6 years without any serious problems. The hardest part of his job was dealing with the daily routine and the occasional equipment failure. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. At 0600 hours, alarms began to sound. Moved quickly through the corridors. Officers ran past him in both directions. The station was suddenly alive with urgent activity. He reached the command center and found Lisa already at the communications station. Lisa was the best operator had ever worked with. She was young, only 28, but she had a gift for understanding complex data. "Commander, we have a serious problem," Lisa said without looking away from her screen. "Moved closer. What do we have?" "Wormhole opening 3 million kilometers from our position," Lisa replied. "Large energy signature, multiple vessels coming through, a lot of them." "Can you identify them?" asked. Lisa shook her head. "Not yet. The signal's signature is unlike anything in our database, but look at the power readings. These are not small ships." Watched as the data came in. The sensors showed dozens of large contacts appearing one after another. Each one was massive compared to anything humanity had built. The vessels were moving in formation, organized and precise. "Send an urgent message to Earth Command," ordered. "Full data packet, maximum priority. They need to know about this." Lisa's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Sending now. It will take 2 hours to reach Earth at light speed." "How long until those ships are in weapons range?" asked. "At their current speed, they will reach the station in approximately 4 hours, said Commander David Price, the tactical officer. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking slightly. "Made a decision. Begin evacuation procedures. Get everyone not needed for station operations off this facility. Priority goes to the scientists, then the support staff, then anyone else who can be moved. We have 4 transport ships docked. Load them as fast as possible." The command center became a hub of intense activity. People moved with urgency but without panic, had trained them well. Everyone knew their role. An hour passed. 2 transport ships had undocked and were moving away from the station. The 3rd ship was loading. Watched the tactical display as the unknown vessels continued their approach. They had not changed course. They had not sent any communication. They simply continued forward. Lisa suddenly made a sound of alarm. "Commander, the lead vessel is launching something. Looks like weapons fire." The station shook. Alarms blared. Smoke filled one of the corridors on the upper deck. The first attack had come without warning. There would be no negotiation, no attempt at peaceful contact. "Return fire," commanded. "All defensive systems activate now." The station's weapons were designed for asteroid mining and meteor defense. They were not designed for warfare against military vessels. The human defense systems fired, but the alien ships barely slowed. One of the attacking craft broke away from the main group and moved toward the evacuation transports. Lisa was sending data as fast as her hands could move. "Still transmitting. Earth will have all of this." "The 3rd transport is fully loaded," reported Officer Jennifer North, the operations manager. "They are undocking now." Watch the transport ships accelerate away from the station. The alien ship changed course to pursue them, but it was already too late. The transports had a head start and superior acceleration. They would reach safe distance before the alien vessel could catch them. "Sir, we need to leave," David Price said. "The station cannot defend itself against this. We are losing pressure in sectors 4 and 7. "Did not move. Load the 4th transport with whoever is left, then undock." "Commander, you need to be on that ship," Jennifer said. Shook his head. "I am staying. Someone needs to remain here to buy time for those transports. I need volunteers, 20 people maximum. We will set up false signal patterns to confuse them about the station's true status. 3 officers immediately stepped forward, then 4 more civilians who had been working in the command center. One was a young engineer named Lee. Another was a doctor named Green. They knew they might not survive. They volunteered anyway. Lisa stood up from her station. I am staying too. No, said. You need to go, you know the communication protocols. Earth will need to understand this message. I can help here for another 30 minutes, Lisa insisted. Then I will go. Did not have time to argue. The main group had already boarded the 4th transport. It was undocking now. Lisa and the volunteers moved through the corridors toward the central engineering hub. They worked frantically, setting up false signals and redirecting power to create the appearance of greater station capability than they actually possessed. When the first wave of alien weapons hit the outer shields, the explosion was tremendous. But Lisa had the message from station reached Earth Command at 0200 hours, Geneva time. Admiral Grace Washington was asleep in her quarters when the alert came through. She woke immediately. Her body did not need much time to respond to urgent signals. 30 years of military service had taught her to be ready in seconds. She arrived at the United Nations Command Center 15 minutes later. The main display showed the data transmission from the research station. Dozens of ships, unknown design, massive weapons capability. The tactical analysis was clear. Humanity had never faced anything like this before. Get me the Security Council, Grace ordered. All permanent members, I want them here or on video conference in 10 minutes. The command center hummed with activity. Grace watched the data being analyzed in real time. Dr. Henry Cole, the chief science officer, was already working on the information. Henry was 60 years old and had spent his entire career studying theoretical physics. He was one of the people Grace had ever known. Admiral, look at these shield frequencies, Henry said, pointing at the analysis. Their technology is different from ours, more brute force, less sophisticated. They rely on overwhelming power rather than efficiency. Grace studied the data. What does that mean? It means their ships might be stronger, but they are not smarter, Henry replied. Our newer shield systems use different principles. We might actually have an advantage if we can get close enough. We have 48 hours before they reach Earth, Grace said. What can we do? Within 30 minutes, the Security Council was assembled. The leaders of the permanent nations appeared either in person or by secure video link. Grace presented the information. The reaction was immediate. Fear, anger, determination. They all understood what was at stake. We need to mobilize everything we have, said President Martinez of the United American States. Every ship, every soldier, every resource. The United European Coalition will contribute all available military assets, added Chancellor Sophia Reeves. We are committing immediately. The Russian Federation, the Asian Union, and the African Alliance all made similar commitments. For the first time in a century, the divided nations of Earth were working together toward a single goal. Humanity was in danger. National borders became meaningless. Grace was given command of all Earth military forces. The responsibility was overwhelming, but she did not hesitate. She began issuing orders. Activate all combat vessel production facilities. We need every warship in space within 48 hours. Call up reserve pilots and crews. Mobilize the civilian fleet. Every cargo ship, every transport, every vessel that can carry supplies or weapons will be commissioned. We will need logistical support on a scale we have never attempted before. Henry Cole approached her as she continued working. Admiral, I have been analyzing their propulsion systems. They are fast, but not as fast as our interceptor-class vessels. If we deploy the 3 carrier groups from Mars and Venus, we can reach their fleet before they reach Earth orbit. Grace nodded. Do it. I want every combat-capable ship in the solar system heading for intercept position, and get me the commander of the carrier group at Venus Station, Captain Victor Santos. I want him taking the lead. The next 12 hours were a blur of activity. Manufacturing plants that had been making consumer goods for decades were converted to weapons production. Research facilities that studied peaceful applications of technology shifted to military development. Universities offered their students to work on rapid solutions to tactical problems. Dr. Sarah King was a bioengineer at the Institute for Advanced Study. She was studying cellular regeneration when the alert came. Within hours, she was in a secure military facility analyzing physiology data. The aliens had sent their own signals, and some of their communications had been intercepted. The data was minimal, but it was something. Sarah studied the biological information from the transmissions. There were carbon-based life forms with a neural structure distributed throughout their bodies. They had redundant systems for consciousness and control, but they also had a weakness. Their primary neural processing center was located in their upper thorax. If that area was damaged, their ships would lose effective command and control. Sarah brought her findings to Admiral Washington. If we target their neural centers with electromagnetic pulses, we can disable their command systems temporarily. It might be enough to disrupt their coordination. Grace made a decision. Develop weapons that can deliver that damage. I do not care if it is experimental. We will test it in combat if we have to. By the time Captain Victor Santos received his orders, human response was already in motion. Cargo ships were being loaded with ammunition and supplies. Fighter pilots were being recalled from retirement. Engineers were designing new weapons systems that had never been built before. Computer scientists were attempting to hack into technology based on incomplete signals. Captain Santos read his orders from Admiral Washington. He was to take 3 carrier groups and intercept the fleet before it reached the inner solar system. He was to defend the evacuation transports from station. He was to buy humanity time. "We can do this," Santos said to his officers. "They have never fought a species before, we have. Every human has survived on a planet that tries to kill us every day. We know how to fight, we know how to adapt, we know how to survive." His officers nodded. They understood the weight of what was coming, but they also understood that Earth had no choice. This was not about military glory or national pride anymore. This was about survival. Captain Victor Santos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the orbital carrier Dawn of Humanity. Around him, his officers watched the tactical displays. The fleet was now visible on all sensors. The enemy vessels were larger than anything humanity had built. Each one dwarfed the human carrier groups. "All hands to combat stations," Santos ordered. His voice was steady and calm. "This is the captain. We are now in combat territory. We will defend these transports. We will buy time for Earth. And we will show these aliens what a species is capable of." The 3 carrier groups consisted of 4 heavy cruisers, 12 missile destroyers, and 30 fighter craft. It was the largest military force humanity had ever assembled in space. Against the fleet of 87 vessels, they were heavily outnumbered. But Santos had something they did not have. He had desperation. The first evacuation transports from station were approaching the rendezvous point. They carried 300 scientists and support staff who had escaped the station. They had detected them immediately. One of the enemy vessels broke formation and accelerated toward the transports. Santos made his decision. "Intercept course. All fighters launch immediately. I want that ship slowed down by any means necessary." The human fighter pilots were young and well-trained. They had trained for years for scenarios exactly like this. But nothing could prepare them for the reality of facing an enemy with such overwhelming firepower. The first wave of fighters launched from the carrier bays, 25 young people in high-speed combat craft, moving toward death. The ship fired. It was a casual weapon discharge, barely a thought from the alien commander. But the energy output was tremendous. 2 human fighters were destroyed instantly. Their pilots had families, they had dreams, they had volunteered to defend humanity, and they were gone in a flash. Officer Karen Wright was in the tactical control center of the flagship. She was 26 years old and had an unusual gift. Karen could see patterns in chaos. She could predict movement based on incomplete data. It was a strange talent, but it was valuable. As Karen watched the ship's movements, she began to notice something. The alien vessel was not moving randomly. It had a pattern. The way it turned, the timing of its weapon's fire, the acceleration curves, there was a logic to it. Karen began marking points on the tactical display. She drew lines connecting them. The pattern emerged. "Captain, I have something," Karen called out. "The vessel is following a predictable movement pattern. If we position our fighters here and here, we can damage their weapons system." Santos looked at the projection. It made sense. "Do it. Reposition fighters to those coordinates." The human pilots moved into position. They fired their missiles. The ship's weapons system exploded. The alien vessel suddenly lost its main firepower. It could still move, but it could no longer attack with the same effectiveness. The evacuation transports accelerated toward the safety of the carrier group. 296 people made it through. 4 died in the chaos of the evacuation, but the transport ships were safe. The commander made a critical mistake. The alien had assumed that humans were primitive and easily crushed. Aliens that lived in harmony with their environment did not understand the concept of desperate struggle. Humanity had evolved on a world that tried to kill them every single day. Earthquakes, storms, disease, predators, starvation. Humans learned to fight for survival before they learned anything else. The main fleet was now within weapons range of the human carrier groups. The battle that followed lasted 6 hours. Human ships moved with speed and unpredictability. The fighters made attacks that no logical AI would ever attempt. They flew into danger zones. They sacrificed themselves to buy seconds for other ships to maneuver. They used broken communication systems creatively. They hacked into enemy signals with improvised code. One young pilot, Jennifer Park, flew directly at a cruiser that was targeting a human missile destroyer. She had no weapons that could hurt the ship. She did not care. She flew her fighter directly into the path of the weapon beam. Her ship was vaporized, but the destroyer behind her survived. The crew on that destroyer lived because Jennifer Park chose to die. The human casualties were heavy. 17 fighters were lost. 2 destroyers were heavily damaged. 1 cruiser had lost main propulsion. But the fleet had been slowed. They had been forced to expend ammunition. More importantly, they had lost the psychological advantage of absolute superiority. Karen Wright's predictions continued to provide crucial information. She predicted where they would move, and Santos positioned his ships accordingly. It was not winning, but it was survival. It was buying time. After 6 hours of continuous combat, Admiral Washington sent new orders. The Mars and Venus carrier groups had been joined by the Earth Defense Fleet. A total of 30 human warships were now in the combat zone. It was not enough to defeat but it was enough to make them pause. The commander transmitted a message. It was translated by the human computers. It said simply, "Surrender or die. This is your only option. You cannot defeat us." Santos recorded a response. "We are from Earth. We are the children of it. We have survived every disaster your planet could throw at us. We have survived our own wars. We have survived our own mistakes. We have survived things you cannot imagine. You cannot make us surrender. You can only kill us. And if you do, millions more will come." The message was sent. It was not diplomatic. It was not formal. But it was true. Captain Victor Santos had no intention of surrendering. Neither did the 300 survivors from station who now sheltered in the carrier group. Neither did the pilots who had already sacrificed themselves. Earth was transformed in 72 hours. Every manufacturing facility on the planet began producing military hardware. Car factories made weapons. Electronics companies designed targeting systems. Chemical plants produced ammunition. Farmers grew food for soldiers instead of civilians. The entire economy shifted toward one singular purpose: survival. Admiral Washington coordinated the response from Geneva, but the military was no longer the only force fighting. Private companies sent their own ships to space. The Orbital Mining Collective contributed 3 transport vessels loaded with supplies. The Atlantic Shipping Company diverted cargo ships to carry ammunition. Universities offered their minds to solve tactical problems. Dr. Sarah King was working 18 hours a day. Her team had developed the first prototype of the electromagnetic pulse weapon that targeted neural systems. The weapon was not perfect. It had only been tested in simulation, but it was ready for deployment. Military transport ships were loading the weapons now. In another 6 hours, they would be in space. Captain was a retired fighter pilot who had hung up his flight suit 20 years ago. He was 52 years old with a family and a job in civilian aerospace. When the alert came, he answered the call. Within 24 hours, he was back in a cockpit. He was flying again, and this time he was fighting for everything. "The new weapons are coming up," told his squadron. "Electromagnetic pulse detonators. They have an effective range of 2,000 kilometers. Our job is to get close enough to deploy them." "What are our odds?" asked Lieutenant Robert, one of the younger pilots. "Probably not good," said honestly. "But worse are the odds for Earth if we do nothing. We accept this mission knowing the risk. That is what being human means. We choose to fight even when the odds are against us." The fleet was growing. Ships came from every nation. The Indian Space Command sent 6 missile frigates. The European coalition contributed their destroyers. Japan provided advanced electronic warfare systems. Every human nation understood that this was not about national pride or military dominance. This was about extinction or survival. Karen Wright was now commanding a tactical analysis team of 40 people. They were receiving data from the fleet every second. Karen processed that data using computers and human intuition. She could predict the alien movements with 70% accuracy now. It was not perfect, but it was better than anything they had expected. "Look at this pattern," Karen said to her team. "The command ship has a specific movement pattern every 6 hours. It is predictable. We can use this." The information was sent to Captain Santos. He implemented Karen's predictions into his tactical plans. The fleet was being systematically maneuvered into positions where they were vulnerable. It was not an accident. It was warfare. The civilian population had responded with remarkable courage. Families evacuated from coastal cities to make room for military installations. Food production was redirected to military supply lines. Medical schools accelerated their programs to produce more combat medics. Nobody complained. Everyone understood that this might be the last battle humanity would ever fight. Dr. Henry Cole was working with the best engineers on the planet. They had been analyzing technology for 4 days. One of the conclusions was shocking. Ships required constant energy input to maintain their shields. If that energy supply could be disrupted, the shields would fail. "They are not more advanced than us," Henry explained to Admiral Washington. "They are just more aggressive. They use more power to achieve the same results. It is the difference between a strong punch and a clever technique. We can be clever." Washington nodded. She was forming a plan, a dangerous plan, a plan that would work only if everything went perfectly. "I want the electromagnetic pulse weapons deployed with precision timing," she ordered. "Target the 3 largest ships. If we can disable their command systems, the rest of the fleet will be disrupted." "That will mean sending fighters directly into their defensive fire," said her tactical officer, Colonel Louis Park. "I am aware," Washington replied. "Send the orders, we will find volunteers." There was no shortage of volunteers. Retired soldiers came back to active service. Young people signed up knowing they might not survive the day. A fighter pilot named Henry, only 19 years old, was one of them. He had never seen combat, but he did not hesitate. He took his fighter up with the electromagnetic pulse weapon loaded in the cargo bay. His orders were clear: get close enough to deploy it, then survive. By the time the fleet was within striking distance of Earth's orbit, there were 240 human combat vessels defending the planet. They were outnumbered 4 to 1, but they were fighting with everything they had. The civilian fleet was positioned around Earth as a second line of defense. If the military failed, the transports and cargo ships would attempt to evacuate people. It was not a real defense. It was desperation. But desperation was what humanity did best. Karen Wright received new data. The command ship was emerging from behind a communication relay station. It would be exposed for exactly 42 seconds. In that window, a human attack would have a chance of success. Karen sent the information to Captain Santos. Santos sent the orders to Henry. Henry pushed his fighter to maximum speed and headed toward the command ship. The alien weapons fired. The human fighter was hit multiple times. The ship was burning, but Henry did not turn away. He accelerated toward the command ship. He reached the deployment distance. He released the electromagnetic pulse weapon. The weapon detonated directly over the command ship. The neural systems of the largest vessel were disrupted. The ship went dark. Its weapons stopped firing. Its engines went silent. Henry's fighter exploded seconds later. The young pilot had sacrificed himself to disable one enemy ship, but that one ship had been commanding 47 other vessels. Without coordination, they became individual targets instead of a unified force. The command ship recovered from the electromagnetic pulse after 18 hours, but in those 18 hours, everything changed. The fleet was no longer a unified force. Individual ships fought independent battles. Human fighters moved between vessels in coordinated attacks. The aliens were losing. Captain Victor Santos watched the tactical displays from the bridge of the dawn of humanity. The losses were now significant. 12 enemy vessels had been destroyed. 37 more were damaged. The human fleet had lost 33 ships and had 120 damaged, but the humans kept fighting. Karen Wright's predictions had become nearly perfect. She could anticipate the movements with 85% accuracy. Combined with human courage and clever tactics, it was enough. Each ship that was destroyed was one less enemy threatening Earth. Each human ship that was destroyed was a sacrifice that bought more time. A destroyer named the Discovery was heavily damaged and had lost main propulsion. The crew was trapped in a dying ship. Captain Elizabeth Anderson, the ship's commander, had to make a choice. She could wait for rescue that might not come, or she could use her damaged ship as a weapon. Anderson gave the order. The Discovery accelerated toward a cruiser using backup thrusters. It was a kamikaze maneuver, a tactic that would cost her life and the lives of her crew. But it would destroy one of the most dangerous vessels. The Discovery struck the ship. Both vessels exploded together. 218 human sailors chose to die so that millions on Earth could live. Commander Hayes was still alive on the remains of station. He and his volunteers had managed to stay hidden in the damaged facility. They had continued to send false signals that confused the about human capabilities, but they were starting to understand the truth. Fewer ships were assigned to deal with the station. Saw his opportunity. The station had a self-destruct system designed for decommissioning. It was not designed as a weapon, but with modifications it could be, and his engineers worked feverishly. They rewired the entire system. When the time came, they would blow the station into the approaching fleet. Admiral Washington coordinated the final phases of the battle from Geneva. She knew they were weakening. She could see it in the tactical data. The human fleet was smaller, but it was more flexible. The humans adapted. They followed patterns that humans could predict. "Push forward," Washington ordered. "All remaining forces converge on the damaged vessels. We finish this now." The human fleet moved in. Thousands of missiles were fired. Hundreds of fighters attacked together. They tried to maintain formation, but it was impossible. They had never faced an enemy that fought with such desperation. They had never encountered a species that valued courage over survival. A young engineer named David Cooper was trapped in a damaged compartment on one of the human cruisers. The compartment was losing pressure. He had 20 minutes before the compartment decompressed completely. He could have tried to escape. Instead, he chose to stay and manually reroute power to the ship's weapons system. His actions allowed the ship to fire one final volley of missiles. Those missiles destroyed a frigate. When the compartment decompressed, David Cooper died instantly. But 700 crew members on his ship survived because he chose to stay. They began to retreat. Their commander ordered a strategic withdrawal. The invasion had failed, but they did not retreat without a fight. The retreating vessels fired continuously, but the human fleet pursued. This was their moment. This was what they had fought for. At station, Hayes received the message from Admiral Washington. "Initiate station destruction. Target the command ship. Final blow." Activated the sequence. The station's reactor was overloaded deliberately. The explosion was tremendous. The entire facility, together with everything Hayes and his volunteers had worked for over 10 years, became a weapon. The explosion struck the command ship. The alien vessel, already damaged from previous battles, could not withstand it. The command ship was destroyed. With their command structure broken, the fleet began to break apart. Individual ships attempted to escape. The human fleet was too fast, too coordinated, too determined to let them go. One by one, the vessels were destroyed or disabled. Karen Wright sat in the tactical control center watching the enemy fleet dissolve. She had predicted every major movement for the final 4 hours of the battle. Her pattern recognition had been the difference between victory and defeat. She was 26 years old, and she had changed the course of human history. Captain Santos led the final pursuit. The last warship attempted to return to the wormhole that had brought them to human space. Santos positioned his ships to block its path. They fired everything they had. 3 human destroyers were vaporized, but the ship was surrounded. It had nowhere to go. The commander transmitted one final message. "You have defeated us. This will be remembered." The ship was destroyed. The invasion was over. The battle had lasted 17 hours of continuous combat. In that time, 193 human beings had died. Over 8,000 had been killed. Human military forces had suffered severe casualties, but Earth had survived. Admiral Washington broadcast to the entire planet. "The threat has been neutralized. The fleet has been defeated. Humanity has proven that we will not surrender. We will not break. We will fight for our home and our families, and we will win. Celebrations erupted on Earth. People danced in the streets. Military personnel embraced each other. Scientists cheered in their labs. Soldiers wept. Everyone understood they had just experienced something historic. Humanity had faced extinction and had won. But the cost was high. 193 human souls were now gone. Each one had families. Each one had dreams. Each one had chosen to defend their world. Somewhere in the darkness of space, Captain Victor Santos watched the debris of defeated ships float past. He thought of the young pilots who had not come home. He thought of the crews on the ships that had been destroyed. He thought of the sacrifice it had taken to bring humanity through this moment. "This is just the beginning," he said quietly to his officers. "We have won one battle, but the galaxy will remember us now." And the last surviving vessel was captured instead of destroyed. Admiral Washington had made that decision. She wanted to understand the enemy. She wanted to know why they had come so far to conquer a world they had never heard of before. She wanted to understand what they had been running from. They were brought to Earth under guard. They were contained in a secure facility designed for holding dangerous specimens. But they were not mistreated. Admiral Washington had ordered that they be treated with respect. They were prisoners of war, not animals. The commander was called Ambassador Vex by the human translators. Vex was a large creature, almost 3 meters tall, with a thick body covered in what looked like natural armor. The alien had multiple eyes and a distributed neural system that allowed some brain function even if parts were damaged. Vex had commanded the invasion fleet. Now Vex was a prisoner. Hayes was brought to Earth to meet with Vex, had survived the destruction of Station. He had escaped in an emergency pod and had been picked up by a rescue ship. He was thin from lack of food and marked by the stress of survival, but he was alive. "Why did you come?" asked the alien through a translation system. "You did not send any warning. You did not try to communicate. You simply attacked." Vex looked at the human with what might have been confusion. "We came because the old empire said your world was ready for conquest. They said your species was primitive and unprepared. They said you would surrender quickly. They were wrong." "Who are the old empires?" asked. "They serve the collective. The collective is ruled by 5 ancient species that control the galaxy. They brought us from our and gave us orders to expand their territory. Your world was assigned to us. We were supposed to conquer it and deliver it to the collective." Understood now. They were not the most advanced threat in the galaxy. They were just soldiers. Soldiers taking orders from powers older than humanity could imagine. Admiral Washington made a decision that changed everything. She granted the ambassador a tour of Earth, not under guard, not in a prison, an actual tour of human civilization. Vex was given permission to see humanity as humans actually lived. Vex was taken to the cities. The alien walked through streets filled with humans of every age and color and origin. Vex saw humans helping each other. Vex saw parents protecting children. Vex saw people rebuilding after the war. Vex saw humans creating art and music and literature. Vex saw humans studying science and medicine and engineering. Vex was taken to the hospitals. The alien watched as human doctors cared for the wounded. Both human and patients were being treated equally. Humans were donating blood and organs to save both human and alien lives. The concept seemed to disturb the ambassador. Vex was taken to the universities. The alien watched humans teaching the next generation. Children and young adults were learning not just to fight and survive. They were learning to think and create and explore. They were building for the future, not just defending the present. Vex was taken to the memorial for the fallen. Nearly 200 human names were displayed. Next to them were descriptions of who these people had been, what they had wanted to do with their lives, what they had sacrificed. The human dead were being honored not as soldiers, but as individuals, as people who had mattered. "Why do you show me this?" Vex asked. "Why do you not keep me imprisoned? Why do you not interrogate me and execute me?" Admiral Washington stood next to the memorial. "Because you came here to conquer our world. You thought we were primitive. You thought we would surrender. I want you to understand why you were wrong. I want you to tell the collective why you were wrong." "They will not accept failure," Vex said. "They will send another force. They will keep trying until they succeed." "Perhaps," Washington agreed. "But now they know they cannot simply walk in and take what they want. Now they know that humanity will fight. Now they know that courage and determination matter more than brute force. Maybe they will think twice before trying again." Vex stood in silence for a long time, the alien's multiple eyes focused on the memorial wall. Your species is illogical. You sacrifice yourselves for others. You fight even when the odds are against you. You create and build and help each other even in the face of destruction. By the measure of any rational species, humanity should have surrendered immediately, but you did not. I understand now why our conquest failed. Over the following weeks, negotiations began. They had access to technologies and resources that could benefit humanity. Humanity had knowledge and skills that could benefit A trade agreement was established that would provide advanced technology and resources. Humanity would provide something the collective had never encountered before: wisdom earned through survival. The story of the invasion spread through the galactic community. Humans had defeated Humans had shown courage that the ancient species did not understand. Young who had been born in slavery under the collective began to question their role. Other species began to believe that they did not have to serve the ancient powers forever. Ambassador Vex returned to the collective with a message. The message was not written in their language. It could not be translated into pure logic. The message was the story of what humanity had done. The story of how a young species had unified against overwhelming odds. The story of sacrifice and courage and determination. The collective received the message. They understood the threat. If humanity could inspire others, if the conquered species began to believe they could resist, the entire galactic order could collapse. The collective would need to respond, but they would not be conquering Earth again. That much was certain. Commander Hayes stood at an observation deck of a new space station being built in Earth orbit. Young pilots were training for combat. Engineers were designing new ships. Scientists were studying technology captured from Humanity was preparing. "What do you think happens now?" asked Lisa, the communication officer who had sent the first signal from station. "I think we grow stronger," replied. "I think we learn from what we have experienced. I think we become the species the collective never expected us to be." "And the other species?" Lisa asked. "The ones the collective controls?" Smiled slightly. "I think they are watching us. I think they are wondering if they could do what we did. I think we just gave the entire galaxy hope that they could be more than slaves." Far away in the depths of space, in the chambers of the collective, the ancient leaders looked at the data about humanity. They understood now. They had made a mistake. They had sent their soldiers against a species that had evolved to fight for survival every single day of their existence. They had sent their soldiers against a species that knew how to cooperate even when divided. They had sent their soldiers against humans. And the collective understood that everything had changed. The age of their absolute power was ending. A new species had arrived in the galaxy, and that species would not be ruled. That changes everything. Human ships closed in. The coordinated advance became chaotic. For the first time, the aliens experienced what it felt like to fight against overwhelming uncertainty. Earth continued to mobilize. By the 48th hour, 500 human combat vessels surrounded the planet. The fleet was still larger, but the balance of power had fundamentally shifted. Humanity had proven it could fight. Now it would prove it could win. The fleet moved forward again. The human forces moved to intercept. The battle would continue. And with each passing hour, humanity gained more advantage, because Earth was mobilizing, and they had never faced anything like human determination before. The three carrier groups began their acceleration toward the intercept point. Behind them, the entire human industrial capacity was shifting into overdrive. Factories produced weapons. Shipyards built new vessels. Soldiers trained for combat they had never imagined. And somewhere in the vast darkness between Earth and the approaching threat, humanity was preparing to meet an enemy that had never known what it meant to face a species willing to fight for its home. Sent the complete data package to Earth. The message had been received. Earth knew about Earth knew they were coming. Looked at his small team of volunteers. They had bought humanity time. That would have to be enough. "Now we survive," said quietly, "as long as we can.